Welcome to the Connected Teamwork podcast by Growth Leaders Network. How do we learn to truly thrive together? How do we stay connected to our authentic selves, each other, and our purpose as a team, especially when challenged? How do we unlock the deeper levels of group intelligence? Enjoy this episode of the Connected Teamwork podcast and learn practical tools to evolve the connectedness of your team to its next level.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carson Hetty. Welcome to the today's episode of Connected Teamwork. I'm joined today by Johan Superwood. He's a VP with Bank of America. Has also worked for some other prominent organizations that you might have heard of, like Comerica and Comcast. And really excited to spend some time with him today to talk about the value of connectedness in teams, servant leadership, and some other topics that are near and dear to his heart. So, Johan, thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And I'm excited to have this conversation today.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being on. We were talking a little bit before jumping on about just the value and the importance of connectedness within teams. You've had a lot of experience with different organizations and different teams. Would love to have you give, maybe a brief introduction of yourself and, any of the, hot topics that you want to make sure we talk about today.
Yeah, sure. Like you mentioned, I've served on different teams within different organizations. And along the way, I've seen things done from different perspectives, with different team cultures, and where I'm at right now, I have a unique perspective as I reflect on my 16 plus years on what works and what doesn't work, and where some of those changes can be made. And one thing, as I mentioned earlier, is I believe in the whole concept around connectedness of being a servant leader, and also leading with value. And what that means for me currently, I currently work on a team of decentralized individuals. So there's no two people that sit in the same city. So it's all virtual, and we have people in the Midwest, in the West, and North, South. So it's important as you work to connect with people, because first of all, we have already established a shared purpose. So we know what we're doing. So how do you go about connecting with those individuals who have individual priorities, but collectively we have a goal that we have to achieve, which is to execute on how we serve our customers. And one of the things I love to do is, first of all, try to personalize some of those relationships, because at the back end of every one of those deliveries that we execute on are people. So I remember one story when I first started my current role about 4 or 5 years ago. A leader told me, since you're in Atlanta, we have a sub team that sits in Atlanta who are very important to how we deliver. So you might want to, meet with them, because they don't get to see people or meet the people on our team. So I thought that was a pretty much good idea. Went to visit with them, took some donuts. It's always good to take donuts. And some
things never change, right?
Yeah, and some hot chocolate. So I spent some time with them, just getting to know them as individuals, and also spending time to understand what their pain points are, what they find, how can together from the perspective of increasing their efficiencies based on what they expect of us as guys in the field. So we had a conversation. People share personal stories of things that worked, things they struggle with, and I also took that information to go back to the guys I work with on the field. So to how can we make sure these guys are delivering and helping us satisfy our customers?
So you said a lot of really important points there, and I want to make sure I highlight a couple that really stood out to me. Number one, I think a lot of us as leaders, we don't always get it right the first time, right? I mean, I think we've all, and, I've had, many years of experience too as a leader as well. I've made a lot of mistakes, right? I mean, I think sometimes we've all fallen into that trap of being reactive in certain moments, or not knowing exactly how to address something when it came up. But we have the benefit of learning from those experiences. And I love how you highlighted, there's been a lot of things that you've learned really how to do and what not to do over time based on experiences, what happened, what worked, what didn't. I think that's really important. The other one is anchoring on, the desire that everyone has to connect, right? I think we're all hardwired to want to have connection. And for everybody, that's different. You said something super important as well about, there's a lot of people right now that are, to your point, that are decentralized, people that live and feel like they're, in siloed environments. And yet we've all got to be rowing, in the same direction in the boat. We got to make sure we're all in the boat. And, I think that's the other key element is how do you get in and understand them on a personal level so that you understand what makes them tick and what they're after and what gets them paid. And they understand the same for you so that you're in it together. You're investing in those relationships. And the last one was around the servant leadership perspective. If you show up as a leader and it's all about, you as the hero, you're the one who makes it all happen, nothing's going to happen. The key element is understanding, to your point, the people. Who are you there to serve? How do you elevate everyone around you? And ultimately, if you elevate them and you help them win, you win as a leader. I'd love to hear from you as well, Johan, highlighting, kind of back in the vein of things that you've learned and things that, you've experienced over time. What are some of the most important lessons that you've learned about how to create a culture of connectedness in your team?
I think one important thing is also leading with value, because currently, if you have people who you work with or who I work with, and they're also, because we're in a partnership structure, they also have partners at a different level. So first of all, understanding what's important to them, understanding how you can help add value to what they're trying to achieve, because at the end of the day, we're trying to achieve the exact same thing.
Right.
That is to deliver for the customers, and that's how we all get paid. So try to understand where you can add value and meet people where they are. So the value you can add to a partner, say in Chicago, based on what his needs are at the time, is different to what you can add to a partner, say that's in New York or California. So for me, I like to spend time understanding what they need. So I like asking the questions, how can I help you? What do you need right now? And I learned that from a market executive, I think it was 4 years ago, just talking to him. I mean, you manage a team across the Southeast. These are very successful guys, been doing this for years. How do you go about managing this team? And he told me, look, I meet people where they are. People that need a little bit of push, I provide a push. People that need a little bit more hand holding, I hold their hands. Whatever people need is what we try to create. I don't believe in the whole concept of one size fit all a solution. So I try to connect on an individual basis, because once I can try to get that button down, once we talk about the collective level, we are delivering from different cylinders, and it makes it even more better. And we're achieving the same thing. So trying to connect on a customized basis.
Yeah. I mean, look, you said something there that was really poignant, and it's, it's really around understanding. And what I love about this, Johan, is that these are things that are easily applicable and almost seem like they should be common sense, but at the same time, we overlook them so often. Like just understanding what looks like help to someone on your team. What's the challenge? What's the problem that they're trying to solve? I can tell you, I've had the pleasure and the benefit of working with a lot of different teams over the years. And it's critical to plug in what you said, meet them where they are, understand where they are on the journey. They don't need you or want you to jump in and swoop in and do their job for them. We have a thing at Microsoft that, it's a framework that we follow called Model, Coach, Care. So you model the behavior that you want to see done. You coach based on where they are on the journey. And that can be any number of things. How can they level up? How can they develop mastery? How can they upskill? What are the right mentor and sponsor relationships that they could be seeking? How can they augment their unique tools? And then the last is care, really understand the person as the person. And meeting them where they are is so vital, because you understand exactly what their unique skills and superpowers are. I've got folks on my team that are super, super analytical. I've got folks on my team that are just drivers, right? But they, don't necessarily do all of the analytical pieces to the same caliber as the super analytical folks, are doing some of the administrative tasks. A lot of us in this world, we get pulled in a ton of different directions. And when you're not in an office setting, especially, and having all that collaborative work happening, or you can't walk right down the aisle and see your collaborators like you could back in the day, now it's up to us to rely on digital tools and reaching out to folks in a bid to connect in order to improve. And I think that's a super important learning to have. But once you as a leader understand your team, what are they uniquely qualified to do better than anybody else? And then ultimately, what challenges can we help them solve? That's, in my mind, from a leadership perspective, removing barriers to their success, empowering and enabling them to do their best work and maximize the outcomes and the impact that they can have by unleashing their true skill set. I'd say, especially anyone that has had the leadership experience that you've had, I mean, I'm sure you've had your fair share of challenging situations where the team wasn't clicking, wasn't gelling for whatever reason. Could you maybe share a story? And maybe this one, has a great outcome, or maybe it has a challenging outcome, a learning experience. We've all had our fair share of that. Would love to hear a story from you on just, an experience where you saw a team that was in some state of disarray. How did you handle that, and what did you learn?
So it was a few years back, and I got into a role where there were a lot of silos. A lot of silos. People were used to doing things a certain way, not receptive to new ideas, or doing different things. So at first, it was kind of difficult because I'm like, how do I navigate this? They're successful in what they do. However, it's not the most efficient way of doing it. So one of the things I try to do was to try to look for small wins. Look for small wins, because I think I learned from my past that it's not a good idea to go into a place and try making drastic recommendations of how to do things. That it never works. All you do is create enemies. So what I tried to do was to find something that will benefit everybody. And it was pretty much around a report. It's simple things. It doesn't affect a whole lot of what was happening. But my thought process was, let me demonstrate to these guys that we could do things a little bit different if they just see what could be done. So my strategy was to not go and try accusing people, this is not right, let's do it differently. I saw an opportunity with how a certain report was done. So we got this UCC files that were just dumped up in Excel. We're talking about millions and millions upon rows. So I reached out to one of our technology partners and was like, can we build a reporting tool that, first of all, will save time, easy to use, and can provide results within a few minutes, as opposed to trying to figure out how to use Excel. So he was on board. So we built a prototype and took that to the team and asked for 50 minutes at a time. So we demonstrated the new tool, and they loved it. They loved it. We show how it will save them time and how it will also drive engagement in the field. They loved it.
Incredible story. We're going to take a quick break. I'm going to share some thoughts, and we'll continue the dialogue with Johan.
You are listening to the Connected Teamwork podcast by Growth Leaders Network. Do you want to learn more about building the next level of connectedness in your team? Please contact Growth Leaders Network on LinkedIn. And now, back to the show.
So we're here today with Johan Superwood, and we're talking about connectedness, servant leadership, and really how do you identify opportunities to create and nurture connectedness in teams. And I think we've uncovered, through the course of this show, why it's so important, because it gets everyone doing their best work. But it doesn't necessarily always just magically happen overnight, and there's going to be disarray in the process. You said something really important on the last segment, Johan, and it's really around when you show up with a team, or you might have elements in your team change. And what do? You can't, I'll give you an example. I started working with a team a while back, and, the results were there, right? So on paper, fundamentally and foundationally, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. However, it's your job and your charter to make sure that you plug in, show growth, you optimize processes, and ultimately you have a successful organization. Because these things are not permanently sustainable. If you don't have the right foundation in place and you're not planting the right seeds in your organization, you want to have sustainable growth. And I think that's what's super important. So even if the results are there, and what I like to say, everybody's getting, riding the wave, as it were, that doesn't mean that wave isn't going to stop at some point. So I loved how you said, you came in, you saw an opportunity for improvement, but you also made sure that the people were engaged and that they were part of the solution and part of the process. I recall in years past, in every team I've ever come into, it's been paramount to get the voice of the team first and foremost. Don't ever come in and start barking orders or start saying you need to do this and you need to do that. Now, sometimes I've had the benefit of having the immediate credibility of having done the job that I'm managing, right? But that's not always the case. And it's even more challenging if you don't have that credibility. And that's why you need to lean on your team even more. It's so vital to understand the voice and the pulse of the team. What's working, what's not. In an optimal world, what would things look like? And make sure that you're not only leveraging that voice to make the changes, but that you're doing it collectively. And then giving recognition. It isn't, hey, I came in and I changed this process and I made it work great. Nobody cares about that. Elevating the people that were a part of it and saying, hey, thanks to your feedback, I brought in Mike or Mary or whomever, and we collectively created this platform. And, that's where the kudos exists, because they ultimately saw the need. You were just an enabler in order to make sure that it was practical reality, and people will join you. People will join you on the road to success when you actively engage them, you listen, voices are heard, perspectives are valued. And even if you don't put everybody's perspective into the final product of whatever it looks like, you can be very, very successful when people feel heard and like they're part of the process for improvement.
Right. And just to add, I think it's important. So if you're working with people who are very skilled at what they do, very experienced at, in whatever field, it's important to identify where you can add value. Because at the end of the day, they've been executing for years without you.
Yeah.
So coming in there and trying to demonstrate that you know what you're talking about doesn't always work. So that's why I like to do a lot of listening. So I will set up these meetup strategy sessions and just ask the question, hey man, you did XYZ last year with the XYZ, what's working, how can I help make the next quarter better? How can we achieve these results? How can we execute on our strategy? And they will tell you exactly what they want as an individual, as opposed to going to the table and asking and saying, okay, I think you need to do XYZ. Yeah, there's a time and place for doing that. But within this context, it's always good to listen. But the caveat to that is, there were times where we will hire guys who've worked in banking, in finance, but I've never worked for a very large company such as Bank of America. You're talking about over 200,000 people with a lot of different tentacles. They don't know where to start. So within that context, is you can go about presenting ideas and options to help them, get acclimated. So it goes to customizing your solution to the people you're working with, the people you're on a team with, so that they can deliver from their vantage point for what's important to them, to the other guy who's been doing it for 20 years and has been with the bank for 10, 15 years and knows what he's doing.
Johan, that's a great point. And one thing I want to ask, because I think one of the biggest challenges, I think all leaders understand that there's value to connectedness, or at least I hope they do. But I also believe that there's one thing to create that environment, but quite another to keep it, right? Because there will inevitably be changes. We're talking to some folks today that are also part of small organizations. You and I work for very large ones, but I know we've worked for varying sizes. And I think the commonality of a big organization or a smaller one is that desire for people to feel like they're a part of something. And, sometimes though, there are cataclysmic changes within people's organizations. There could be layoffs, there could be changes within the economic climate. There's a lot of things that can take a toll on connectedness as part of a team. And I've got a brief story that I'm going to share, but I want to hear from you first as far as, when you've seen some of these tides, some of these changes in the business, how do you keep connectedness? How do you make sure that people are still feeling like they're a part of something, even when there's a lot of uncertainty?
I think it's important. That's where you try to humanize your experiences, humanize yourself. Because I think a lot of times people try to just put on this persona that, I'm supposed to do this, I'm supposed to maintain a certain behavior, look, or whatever. But at the end of the day, we're all people. It might be somebody else today, it might be you tomorrow. So, and we all go through struggles in the workplace. So I think sometimes it's easier to break down some of those barriers if you can just humanize your experience. If you can share where you've fallen, I would say, victim to some of those changes, and if not, it doesn't hurt empathizing. That's where you listen. Make people feel like this. They're seen. They're heard, and you're there for them. So even with the whole disruption around the COVID and going back to the office, and people start different things in their lives, and you're sitting there and you have a colleague who maybe was in Wisconsin, but pre-COVID were office out of Chicago. But it was fine. You could stay in Wisconsin and then maybe once a month go to the office.
Right.
But then return to office, you had to drive maybe from a different state to work in a different state. So even though it wasn't a bad commute for me, but that had the propensity to mess up the team morale. Because I wasn't happy about driving back in the office 3-4 days a week, but we had to do it. So trying to share my experiences with some of my colleagues to let them know, hey, we're all in this together. We got to do what we got to do. So I think it's important to try and humanize some of those interactions so people feel listened to, feel seen, and feel heard.
Couldn't agree more. I think it's interesting. I think, you and I have the benefit of being in the workforce and being a part of teams and leading teams for some time. And I look back at the greatest relationships that I've had with people that have worked for me and that I have worked for. And with all of them, the commonality is that there was a genuine relationship. We knew, each other's spouses, we knew each other's kids' names, we shared stories and heartfelt stories at that. When I was going through a very challenging personal time with family issues and things of that stature, that there were people in my sphere that knew about that. And that's not to say that that's something that you want to share with everyone that you work with.
True.
But being intentional and judicious about, who you want to let into that sphere, which relationships do you really want to invest in? Those things can be super, super important and very fulfilling as well. The other element that you highlighted very articulately as well, Johan, was, really around the element of, everything has changed, right? Everything has changed in the ecosystem, but being able to sit in sometimes that angst and that pain with people that work for us is very, very valuable. I've had a lot of ups and downs in my career. I've had some very challenging things transpire. And I feel like it helps me to understand sometimes when people on my team are going through things. And being able to, I had a person a few years back who was really going through some challenging times, and they got kind of dealt a bad hand with some changes that happened in the organization, and they were checked out. They were canceling some of our one-on-ones, and I actually went to my leader at the time to really understand, like, how can I meet this person at a better place? And her suggestion was, just reach out and say, hey, I understand, take all the time that you need, but we do need to have a connection point, and please feel free to find any time that works for you and put the ball in their court. They did. They found the time. We connected. I was able to really listen to what they were going through, and ultimately we created a plan together, and it had a positive outcome. But I think the key element is, that human element, meeting people exactly where they are, sitting in the angst and the pain, even if it's uncomfortable or ugly, or you're powerless to do anything. Sometimes just hearing them and being able to operate with that angst and that pain in mind as you lead them, and as you guide them and as you navigate through things, those types of things can be super, super valuable. Johan, I've really appreciated this dialogue today. We're talking to a lot of business leaders, people who are leaders today, or maybe aspire to be leaders. What's some practical advice that you would give leaders out there today, on steps that they could take today, wherever they are, to make sure that they are working as a servant leader and that they're instilling connectedness in their teams?
I think one key lesson I've learned over the years is, at the end of the day, it's not about you. It's about the people that you lead. So, and that goes back to being a servant leader. If you're a servant leader, you realize that there's a goal that has to be achieved. Put the egos aside. You're there to help people, and they're there to help you. So it's a win-win situation if you see it that way. So that's the first. And the second thing is, lead by example. Let your words, stand by your words, say what you mean what you say, and act on what you say you will do. If there are instances where you need to walk it back, it's always good to open a clear, open dialogue with people. So that leads to respect, that leads to trust, that leads to people seeing you as a person. So I'll say to any leader, any aspiring leader, try to, first of all, implement those two basic principles. It has nothing to do with your expertise in what you do. Just those two basic things, I think, will go a long way with the other teams that you manage.
Magical. Couldn't have said it better. I think it's when you make the decision to move into a leadership position, you've got to check your ego at the door. Ego might have been a big part of being an individual contributor. I know there's a lot of folks that we're probably talking to right now that have been in a sales career. Individual contributors, ego, a dose of it is fine and good, right? It's going to help you build confidence. But when you move to a leadership position, you are not the hero. You're the hero maker, helping your team see around corners, bringing your wealth of experience to the mix to help them and empower and enable them to be successful. And then also supporting them wherever they are in the journey. Those things are very, very important. And being a leader, that's why being a leader is such a big charter. And why not everyone is great at it or cut out for it, or why there's a lot of learning for it. I make no qualms about sharing that in my early leadership career, I didn't have a lot of mentors and training, and I was still very focused on, how do I win? And it took me a while to really understand that it was not at all about me. It was more, how can I help make everyone around me better? How can I be a multiplier? How can I help them maximize their impact and drive tangible outcomes? Anything else that, Johan, you want to share or talk about before we sign off for today?
Yeah, so I'll just also want to mention, at the end of the day, as a leader or aspiring leader, you also got to try and be connected to your true self. You cannot do this all by yourself. You have families that support you as you go to work to try to get things done. We deal with things on a daily basis, from teammates, from senior leader, people that customers. So I think it's also important to make sure you're not forgetting about the things, the people that help you do what you do. It might be your faith. For me, it's my faith and my family. I try to make sure I'm connected to those two. And also take time to do your own personal mental audit to see what you've done, where you can improve, where you've messed up, and the lessons you can learn from those individual experiences you've had, and also keep evolving as a person.
I love that. I think, a lot of times leaders don't or won't make a move or take a step because they're afraid potentially of the ramifications. And I think if you show up seeking to serve, and you don't have to have all the answers, you can be your true self, and you want to encourage your team to be their true selves and to let their strengths and their superpowers shine. And when it's funny because the more experience that you get, you almost have this rarefied air because you get to a point where, hey, I've seen this before. I've experienced this before. I know what will work. I know what won't work. And I think the key element is sometimes as a leader, you just have to shrink the bubble, shrink the common denominator, and realize that it's a people thing. Dive in, listen to the people. No job is beneath you. Roll up your sleeves, get to work, jump in. The best experiences that I've ever had as a team leader have been right there in the trenches with my team. And even if it's the stuff that, don't ever ask them to do anything that you wouldn't do, because I will tell you, like, throwing them to the wolves of like a big customer satisfaction issue or whatever the case may be, or letting them do it because that's in their job description, I'll stand right there on the lines with them and, get the feedback, show how important these things are. And I think the more that you spend time with your team and listening to your team, those are the types of things that earn their trust, that show that you've got that credibility, and ultimately will ensure that connectedness is always a part of your team.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Beautiful. Johan, thank you so much. To our audience, thank you for being with us today. And you've been hearing today from Johan Superwood on the Connected Teamwork Podcast. We will see you next time. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Carson.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Connected Teamwork Podcast by Growth Leaders Network. Take a moment to reflect on what you learned today that can help build your team. Also, if you like, think about one of your team members and what you appreciate about them. Let them know. Enjoy connecting more deeply to what is great about them. And see you next time at the Connected Teamwork Podcast.